Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of the Trailblazers podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine. Today, we will talk with Colorado author Bob Silvernagel. Bob has a regular column in the Grand Junction newspaper and has written 5 books. Today, we will talk about his book, Troubled Trails, which devotes a chapter on our favorite historical figure, Josie Meeker. Welcome, Bob. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yay! All right, and
Was that cool?
first up,
What's the first question, Jazz?
So our first question is, what made you like Josie Meeker and want to write about her?
Why did I write about her? Well, what made me like her is she was such an active, independent young woman, both when she was living in Greeley and when she moved to the White River Indian reservation with her father and mother. I wrote about her because I was writing mostly about what happened with the Ute Indians during the 1879 confrontation with the cavalry and with the killings at the Meeker Indian Agency. And because she was such an important part of that, she was, as you know, taken hostage by the Utes along with her mother and another woman and 2 young children. And she also testified a lot before some official hearings about what happened. And she wrote a book, or probably her brother wrote it, but this is what she wrote that was her own story about what happened. And she just, more than any of the other hostages, she provided a lot of information about what was going on both before and after the events at the White River Agency that led to the women being taken hostage. So that's why I wrote.
Our second question is, how long did it take you to research her life and story, and where did you get your research?
I don't know specifically how long it took me to research the stuff about Josephine Meeker. It took me 5 years to research the whole book. I was working full time then. I've since retired, but I was working full time, and Josephine was a part of that, obviously. And where I got her information was that book I just showed you that her brother wrote, or it's believed her brother wrote, even though she's listed as the author. In the museum today in Greeley, Colorado, there's a lot of information about the Meeker family when they were living there in Greeley, and then later when they moved to the White River Indian Agency. So I got a lot of stuff there. And then there are official records of the times, the 2 major investigations about what happened. And Josephine testified at both of those. So her information is in the official records, the 2 official records of the investigations. So that's where I got most of the information about Josephine.
Our next question is, what do you think made her so adventurous?
Good question. I'm not sure. I mean, she grew up in a time in the 1870s in a place in Greeley, or the Union Colony as it was called then, that was pretty wild and wide open. But her sister wasn't as adventurous as she was. And I think we see that in families today. Sometimes one family member will be really adventurous and the other won't be. I think she just loved to be outdoors, but as Russ said, she was also well educated, the first woman at the Denver Business School. But I think she really loved to be outdoors. Obviously, she loved to ride horses, climb mountains, and she met a woman when she was still in Greeley named Isabella Bird, who came through in 1873. And this lady had gone all over the world by herself. And I'm sure she told Josephine and others and the sisters stories about that. My own belief is that she helped inspire Josephine, but I can't say for sure.
Okay. Our next question is, what did Josie Meeker do when she was with the Native Americans when she was captured?
She kept her own attitude positive through most of it, even though it was definitely a very scary situation. She helped her mother and Flora Ellen Price, the other woman. I'm trying to look for a photo here. It's in my book. Let me see if I can find it.
That's really cool.
So in this picture in the book, which is it's when you get to the photos after page 118, just before page 119, this photo shows Josephine, Flora Ellen Price, and the two kids. But when they were taken captive at the end of September, they didn't have any extra clothes with them. They just had whatever was available. So the dress that Josephine is wearing in that picture, yes, the dress she's wearing there, she made out of Indian horse blankets while she was a captive. She sewed her own dress to be warmer because it's all wool. And she also made some for her mother and Flora Ellen. So even though they were riding horses a lot of the time, there was times when they weren't doing a lot, and she found time to sew then by hand. Didn't have a sewing machine, obviously. So pretty enterprising and independent young lady.
Okay. Our next question is, how has her story impacted today's society?
Well, I think what happened at the White River Agency, and especially the fact that the hostages were taken, made people so angry in Colorado that within a couple of years, most of the youth were pushed out of Colorado. And so where I live in Western Colorado by Grand Junction, and most of Western Colorado, from Craig down to Durango, probably would have looked a lot different. There might be a reservation near Meeker, an Indian reservation today. There might be a lot more different configuration of the land. There might not be the national forest there were. If all of this hadn't happened, and if Josephine hadn't been an outspoken advocate for her and her mother and the other woman during the events of 1879. So I think it changed the way Colorado developed significantly.
My last question is, what was it like being a woman among the Utes?
Among the Indians?
Yeah.
You know, the women weren't always treated well. The men were the hunters and the warriors. The women, they cooked the meals, they set up the teepees, did all the preparation of the hides when they killed deer or elk or other animals. The women scraped the hides clean and tanned them and laid them out and made clothing from the deer hides and other hides for their husbands, for their children, for themselves. But it also wasn't all dreary for them. They were, in some ways, treated better than women in eastern cities at that time. And there are stories that I mentioned in my book where a woman, an Indian woman who wanted to get on her horse, her husband came and got on his hands and knees next to the horse so she could stand on his back and climb onto the horse. And the women pretty much ran the home, the teepee. They were in charge. They could tell their husband, get out of here with your muddy moccasins on, or, they were in charge of that. They could, they made a lot of beadwork and like deer hide clothing, and they could sell that themselves for money or trade it for other goods. So it wasn't an easy life, but it wasn't all horrible either.
So I have a few more questions, actually. Sorry. My next question is, what makes your story so important?
Well, I don't know if it's just my story, but the other authors who've written about the same event, as I said before, it changed the way Colorado developed. And it's an important story. It changed the way Colorado developed, and it changed what happened to the Ute Indians. And I think it's important for those of us who live in Colorado to understand how things changed because of this. I know Ute Indians whose family were moved as a result of what happened. And some of them are still pretty bitter about it, even though it was their great grandparents or whatever. They still, excuse me, are bitter about what happened. Others, like a good friend that I mentioned in the book named Jonas Grant Bullethead, have come more to terms with it, and they just want to get their side of the story out there and I guess that's one of the things I really tried to do with my book. So many of the earlier books were just the story from the white people's side. I wanted to get the story from the Ute side as much as I could as well.
And Bob, this is Russ. How you doing? Good to see you. What do you think, particularly young women today, can take away from Josie's story?
I think that it's a sort of never give up attitude, that you keep going even when things are not very pleasant. And you try to make sure you not only survive, but you thrive to the extent possible. And the other thing I think was important with Josie is, even though she was taken captive and held hostage for, I forget, 23 days, she wasn't as bitter as some of the other people about the Utes. So I think having compassion even for those who mistreat you is an important thing to take from this as well. Did you mute?
Sorry about that. And for our Trailblazers club, I know that they were particularly fascinated about the horseback riding. And you start your chapter on Josie Meeker with a little bit about that. Could you tell us just a little bit about Josie and horses?
Okay, but I have a question for you first.
Oh, sure.
You mentioned side saddles a lot. Did you find specific references?
I did. Yeah, I found references to her dad requiring her to ride side saddle and that resulting in an accident?
That, I think, probably happened in Greeley. When they were on the White River, they weren't riding side saddles. They were riding in Indian saddles or regular Western saddles that the Indians had gotten from traded or stolen or whatever. And they rode a lot while they were captives. They went in some places that were, I mean, I've been riding horses for 60 years or more. I wouldn't go in places that they rode. I would be scared to death in some of the places they rode. I know they were very sore after the first couple of days, but Josephine, of the 3 adult women, was certainly the best horsewoman and the one person who spent the most time on horses. And she'd been out riding with the Utes before any of this happened, just on friendly rides going sightseeing. So she knew horses, knew how to ride with them and stuff, but it was still an ordeal to spend 10 or 12 hours of the day in a saddle, riding over very rough country. I don't think most of the time with the Indians, they weren't galloping at full speed or anything. They were walking, maybe trotting and cantering a little, but not, they were trying to cover ground, but not at full speed. Like I said, I'm still amazed. When I was doing research for the book, we flew over parts of it. We rode horseback on parts of it. We drove a lot of it because a lot of it's roads now. And just looking at where they went still amazes me.
And on that note, Long's Peak, climbing Long's Peak as a teenager in the 1870s. What do you make of that? That seems pretty incredible to us.
It does. I can't remember if I saw an account by her. Did she write anything, journal about it? I don't think so.
I haven't seen any firsthand.
Jasmine's nodding. Did you see some?
I think it was
think
Isabel Bird,
Yeah.
or Isabella Bird that wrote about it.
Yeah, Isabella Bird wrote an amazing story about that. And so if you just go by hers, you get an understanding of how difficult it was. Some of us in the 21st century have climbed 14ers, but we have good gear and
cars to get to the trailhead.
Yeah.
She had to ride her horse from Greeley to Long's Peak to start.
Yeah. So it was an amazing undertaking, but clearly she wasn't the first. I don't know that Isabella was even the first woman. There were a couple other women who climbed it as well. So
and amazingly, they. 2 of the first women to climb Long's Peak have a direct connection to Josie, because Isabella, and I believe you even said, stayed at the house, at Josie's house when she visited. And then you had Anna Dickinson, who was, I believe, the first. And her brother, Josie's brother, was courting Anna and in love with Anna. So just fascinating. You got to imagine that those interactions had to influence the earlier question about, what made her so adventurous. I would imagine having those women in your life would help.
And then think about climbing a mountain in a dress that came down to your ankles and tight leather boots. They probably wouldn't have been wearing the corset then. You guys know what a corset is?
Yes.
Yeah. They wouldn't have, they would take the corset off to go mountain climbing, but they're still wearing long dresses and tight little shoes, and just can't imagine what it was like. And
they didn't have Cliff Bars either.
No, and didn't have Gore-Tex, wool sweaters, wool jackets,
or really established routes either, or a guidebook or any of that.
No.
Yeah. So, well, I think you agree that Josie stands out as a remarkable figure in history, someone to be remembered and celebrated. And that's really kind of the gist of this club here, is to really bring history to life and celebrate, figures that are maybe almost lost to history.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate your
Good for you
time.
guys. What's your next project? Do you know yet?
Well, we're continuing with Josie. So it's all about Josie. We'll be writing a book about Josie and interviewing other folks about Josie and things that connect to her life. And then after that, we'll see where it goes. But there's lots of folks that are in the Josie Meeker fan club. There's museums out in Western Colorado. There's lots of historians that are really captivated by this story, and we're looking forward to connecting with more of them.
Well, good. Well, you guys, good luck with your project. Thanks for the great questions.
Yeah, good job, Jasmine. Any closing thoughts?
Thank you for joining us. And
You're welcome.
I hope you have a good night.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay. We stopped. We did it. We're back.